Hey everyone, and welcome back to Sip and Talk. Are you guys ready for another deep dive with us today?
I'm ready to get my brain working.
All right.
Especially with a good sip of something tasty.
Yeah, you know it. It's got to be fun and relatable, right?
Yeah.
Speaking of fun, we got to give a shout out to our buddy Micky in Taiwan.
Yeah.
You guys know him, right?
Oh yeah, Mickytolife.
Dude's got the travel vlogs, whiskey reviews.
Hilarious.
It's like a guide to living life to the fullest.
You know, I'm always down for a good whiskey recommendation.
Yeah, for sure. We'll drop a link in the show notes so you guys can check him out.
Perfect.
But for now, let's get our history hats on.
Oh, okay.
Today we're talking about the world of human struggles.
Oh.
How societies went from these small villages to these massive, complex nations.
Yeah.
And how that journey always seems to lead to, social hierarchy.
It's fascinating, isn't it? You start with a small group, everyone knows each other.
Right.
Things are pretty egalitarian. But as soon as things get more complex, more people, more resources, more land to manage, you need order.
Yeah. It's like, who's going to be in charge of the wheat supply?
Right.
Who's going to make sure that weirdo Bob isn't stealing everyone's goats?
Exactly.
And next thing you know, bam.
Yeah.
Someone's calling the shots, and not everyone gets an equal say anymore.
That's where things get interesting. We're going to unpack how that need for systems, for rules and laws, basically laid the groundwork for these divisions between the rule makers and the rule followers.
Okay, so we've got systems, we've got order in the mix, but then there's this whole other element that kind of pops up as societies get bigger.
Right.
Religion.
It's like as humans, we're always trying to make sense of the world around us.
Right.
When things are chaotic or unpredictable, religion can offer a sense of comfort, of belonging, of shared meaning.
Yeah, totally. Imagine you're a hunter-gatherer facing wild animals, unpredictable weather. Having those shared beliefs and rituals probably brought people together. But then the big question is, did religion help create those social divisions?
Right.
Or did it just become a tool for those who were already in power?
Ooh, that's the million-dollar question.
Right.
Did religion fuel inequality or simply get hijacked by the folks who were already calling the shots? It's like a historical chicken or the egg dilemma.
All right, let's play devil's advocate a little bit here.
Okay.
What evidence is there that religion was actually a driving force behind those early social hierarchies?
Well, think about ancient Sumer around 3500 BC.
Okay.
The temples weren't just places of worship, they were like the economic hubs of the city.
Like a combination of church bank and community center all rolled into one.
Exactly. The priests controlled the land, the resource, the offerings. They basically had a monopoly on the wealth.
Wow.
And wouldn't you know it?
Yeah.
That's when we start to see those class divisions solidifying.
So it's not necessarily that religion itself was bad.
Right.
But that controlling the resources, even the name of religion, gave certain people a huge advantage.
Yeah, it's a really good point. And we see similar patterns in other ancient civilizations.
Okay.
Take ancient Egypt, for example.
Oh, yeah.
The pharaoh wasn't just a king. He was considered a god.
Whoa.
Talk about solidifying your position at the top.
It's like, don't even think about challenging my authority. I've got the big guy upstairs on my side.
Exactly. And even before those big empires,
Yep.
there's Göbekli Tepe in Turkey.
Okay.
One of the oldest religious sites we know of.
Wow.
Those are massive stone structures.
Oh, yeah.
Someone had to organize all that labor.
Oh, yeah. You're telling me I can barely get my friends to help me move a couch?
Right.
Let alone build a giant temple complex.
It suggests that even in those early societies, religious leaders had a lot of influence and could mobilize people on a large scale.
Yeah. Okay. So we've got ancient Sumer, ancient Egypt, and Göbekli Tepe all kind of pointing to a possible connection between religion and the rise of social hierarchies. But what about the other side of the story?
Okay.
Is there evidence that challenges this idea?
Well, there's actually some pretty compelling evidence that challenges that idea that religion always equals instant hierarchy.
Okay.
For example, if we look at burial sites from way back in the Paleolithic period, we see that people were often buried with similar goods.
Yeah.
And in similar ways.
So it wasn't like, oh, Bob was the shaman, so he gets the deluxe cave burial with all the cool flint tools.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It suggests that those early religious ideas, like the concept of an afterlife, didn't necessarily translate into, I'm closer to the gods, so I get more stuff.
Interesting. So it's not a clear-cut case of religion equals hierarchy.
Right.
Is way more nuanced than that.
Right. And if you look at some modern-day hunter-gatherer societies, like certain Aboriginal groups in Australia, their spiritual leaders, the shamans, they're not living in fancy huts and bossing everyone around.
So it's not like they're rocking the bone jewelry and hogging all the best kangaroo steaks?
Not quite. Their role is more about serving the community, maintaining traditions, and connecting with the spiritual world, not about lording it over everyone else.
Okay, so maybe religion in its earliest forms was more about bringing people together, finding meaning, and explaining the unexplainable.
Yeah.
And it was only later, as societies became more settled and complex, that it got tangled up with power struggles and stuff.
That's a really insightful way to put it.
Yeah.
It wasn't necessarily that religion inherently creates inequality.
Okay.
It's more that it became a powerful tool.
Yeah.
A symbol, a source of authority that could be used by those seeking to control resources or establish dominance.
I get it. It's like anything powerful, it can be used for good or for not so good.
Exactly.
It all depends on who's wielding it.
Right.
Okay. So we've established that the shift from chill villages to sprawling nations almost always involves some form of hierarchy. But how did this play out in different types of government throughout history? Did some systems manage to keep things a bit more balanced than others?
That's a great question.
Yeah.
Let's take a fast forward through history.
Okay.
And look at some more recent examples.
Yeah.
On one end of the spectrum, you have totalitarian regimes.
Yeah, okay.
Where power is super concentrated.
Right.
It's like a closed-off system where the rulers control everything.
Like a super strict neighborhood association.
Yeah.
But for an entire country.
Uh-huh.
No painting your house the wrong color.
Right.
No loud parties or else.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And a perfect example of this is the nomenklatura in the Soviet Union.
Okay.
Essentially, it was a class of elite citizens who enjoyed special privileges.
Yeah.
Better housing,
right.
Access to goods, healthcare, all because of their position within the Communist Party.
So it wasn't even necessarily about being super rich or having a fancy job.
Right.
It was all about your connections to the political system.
Exactly. And this created a rigid hierarchy where your place in society was determined not by your skills or hard work, but by your loyalty to the ruling party.
And what about those countries that are supposed to be more egalitarian?
Okay.
Like democracies.
Uh-huh.
Don't they at least try to level the playing field?
Well, in theory, yes.
Okay.
But the reality is often much more complicated.
Yeah.
Take the United States, for example.
Okay.
While it's a democracy on paper, the wealth gap is enormous.
Yeah, I've seen those stats.
Right.
The richest 1% owning more than the bottom 90% combined. It's pretty mind-blowing.
And it's not just about money. Even in countries with strong social safety nets, like those Scandinavian countries everyone always talks about, you still see social hierarchies at play.
Really? I thought those Nordic countries were supposed to be like utopia.
It's a nice image, but it's not the whole picture. They might have more economic equality than some other countries, but there are still elites. They might not be as flashy or ostentatious as the super rich elsewhere, but they still hold positions of influence and power in business, politics, and culture.
So it's like, no matter where you go, there's always going to be some sort of social ladder.
Right.
Is true equality just a fantasy?
That's a question philosophers have been grappling with for centuries.
Wow.
It's a question that touches on some really deep ideas about human nature, the role of systems, and the pursuit of power and status.
All right, I think we need a moment to process all this.
Okay.
It's given me a lot to think about.
Yeah.
When we come back, we'll wrap up this deep dive by exploring what all this means for us today.
Okay.
And how we can navigate this crazy, complex world of human struggles in a way that promotes, you know, a little more kindness and understanding.
Right.
Stay tuned. Welcome back to Sip and Talk. My brain feels like it just did a marathon through history. Ancient Sumer Egyptian pharaohs, Soviet comrades, even those cozy Scandinavians.
A lot to take in.
It's mind-blowing to realize how deeply embedded this whole idea of social hierarchy is in like pretty much every society.
Yeah, it's definitely a recurring theme throughout human history, and you hit the nail on the head no matter where you go. There's always some kind of pecking order.
It's kind of depressing in a way, right? Yeah. It's like, okay, so the game is rigged. Should we just accept it and try to climb the ladder as best we can? Or like what?
I think the first step is simply being aware.
Okay.
Recognizing those unspoken rules, understanding how those hierarchies operate, and seeing how they impact people's lives. That's crucial.
Yeah.
You can't fix a problem you don't even realize exists.
Right. I like that awareness is step one.
Yeah.
Okay, so that once we've got those awareness goggles on, what's next?
Right.
Do we try to dismantle the whole system, work within it to make it fair, or just focus on our own individual climb?
There's no one-size-fits-all answer, right?
Oh,
it depends on your values, your personality, your circumstances.
Yeah.
Some people might be driven to activism to challenge the system head-on. Yeah.
Others might focus on using their position to create positive change within their own spheres of influence.
And some folks might just want to focus on, like, living a good life, taking care of their families, and not getting too caught up in the whole hierarchy game.
Right. And all of those approaches are valid.
Yeah.
I think the key is to act with intention.
Yeah.
To be conscious of the choices we're making and the impact those choices have on others.
That's a good point. Once you see the game being played, you can at least choose how you want to play it, or even choose not to play at all.
Exactly.
But one thing I think we've learned today is that it's really easy to judge people.
Oh, yeah.
Based on where they are in that social pecking order.
Absolutely. It's so tempting to think, oh, those rich folks are all greedy, or those people at the bottom are just lazy.
Right.
But it's rarely that simple, is it?
No, we all have our own stories, our own challenges, our own privileges.
Exactly.
And it's like someone might be born on third base and think they hit a triple perfect analogy. And on the flip side, someone might be facing incredible obstacles that we can't even imagine.
Right.
It's important to actually listen to people's stories, understand their journeys, and recognize the systemic factors that might be at play.
Yeah. It's like that saying, walk a mile in someone else's shoes.
Right.
Empathy is key.
Exactly. And it's not about feeling sorry for people or pretending everyone has it equally rough.
Right.
It's about recognizing that everyone deserves to be treated with dignity and respect, regardless of their background or social standing.
So what are some practical things we can do to, actually make a difference? Should we all join protests? Donate all our money to charity? Become social media warriors?
Well, those are definitely options.
Yeah.
But it can also be much simpler than that.
Okay.
It can start with educating ourselves, reading books, listening to podcasts like this one, having open-minded conversations with people who have different perspectives.
And calling out BS when we see it. Right?
Yes.
Like if you hear someone making a prejudiced joke or spreading harmful stereotypes, don't be afraid to speak up.
Exactly. And it's not about being preachy or starting arguments.
Right.
It's about gently challenging those assumptions and creating a more inclusive and respectful environment.
I love that. So it's not just about these grand gestures. It's about those everyday interactions, those small acts of kindness and understanding that can actually chip away at those invisible walls that divide us.
Beautifully said. And who knows, maybe if enough of us start making those small changes, we can create a ripple effect that leads to a more just and compassionate world.
Okay, that's a great message to end on.
Yeah.
Thanks for joining us on this epic deep dive into the world of human struggles we've traveled through time.
I did.
Explored ancient civilizations, dissected modern society.
It's been a journey.
I know we hope you guys learned a thing or two, had some laughs along the way, and are feeling a little more empowered to create positive change in your own corner of the world.
And remember, wherever there are people, there will be challenges. But there will also be hope, resilience, and the incredible potential for growth and transformation.
Yeah.
Never underestimate the power of human connection.
And speaking of awesome humans, don't forget to check out our friend Micky's YouTube channel, Mickytolife. We'll drop a link in the show notes. He's got travel tips, whiskey reviews, just good vibes all around.
He's the best.
All right, folks, that's a wrap for today. Thanks for tuning in to Sip and Talk. We'll catch you next time. We always got to go deep, deep, deep on a topic, right? This time we're going to go deep on something a little different. We're diving into your thoughts, your comments.
Oh, excellent.
After our last deep dive on cross-strait relations and all that online nationalism stuff.
Yeah.
I mean, people had things to say, let me tell you.
They did. It seems our exploration sparked quite a conversation.
Yes, it did.
What's fascinating to me here is just the diversity of perspectives.
Yeah.
The depth of engagement from our listeners. It's great.
Yeah. And you know what? Like, Bookworm Taipei totally nailed it with that comment about the parallel universes of Weibo and PTT.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, come on.
That's brilliant.
That is such a great way to think about this whole thing.
Did it?
So maybe you can give us a little more on that whole parallel universes thing.
Absolutely. So, imagine you've got these two separate online worlds, right?
Okay.
In one world, Weibo, you're more likely to encounter discussions that emphasize a shared history between mainland China and Taiwan with the goal of eventual unification.
Gotcha.
But then you go to this other world, PTT,
right,
the focus might shift to Taiwan's separate development as a democracy with less emphasis on that shared history.
Okay.
It's like they're operating with different sets of facts and historical narratives.
Totally different realities.
Exactly.
Yeah, it's wild.
Yeah, it really is.
And, that makes understanding those different perspectives so much clearer.
Right.
And, we even had people like Jay Wanderer saying that this was their favorite episode yet.
Oh, wow. That's fantastic.
I know, right? But then, BQ28302 throws us a little bit of a curveball here with a question about TAT.
Okay.
Which, by the way, means natural independence.
Right.
For anyone who might not be familiar with the term.
Good point.
And they asked whether this Seicho identity is truly naturally formed.
Okay.
Or is it shaped by, education and media?
Oh, that's interesting.
What are your thoughts on that?
It's a tough question. It really is.
Yeah.
Nature versus nurture, There are so many factors that kind of intertwine personal experiences, societal influences.
Right.
The historical context.
All this stuff all mixed together.
Exactly. It's like trying to untangle a giant knot.
Yeah, like a big messy knot.
Absolutely.
But speaking of identity, I thought Echo 89 made a really interesting point about the clash actually being more about identity than just politics.
Oh, really?
Yeah, they said that DC, which refers to those young nationalistic Chinese netizens.
Right.
They see unity as strength.
Okay.
While T's see freedom as survival.
Interesting.
Do you think that's an accurate assessment?
I think it is. I think it really highlights how these groups have fundamentally different values and worldviews. A strong, unified China is paramount.
Yeah.
They see Taiwan as an integral part of that vision.
Makes sense.
It's a different story.
Yeah.
Individual freedom, democratic values, these are non-negotiable.
Gotcha.
And they see those very values as threatened by the prospect of unification with mainland China.
So basically, it's two different visions of what the future should look like.
Exactly.
Which, that makes bridging that gap super challenging.
Incredibly challenging.
But, of course, not all the feedback was glowing praise.
Oh.
We did have some people like Keyboard Peacemaker who pointed out that we maybe glossed over the issue of cyberbullying. Specifically cyberbullying from Green.
Right.
Do you think that's something we should maybe explore a little more?
That's a valid point. I think online nationalism, it can foster this sense of community and belonging,
Sure.
It can also manifest in really harmful ways, like harassment and hate speech and cyberbullying.
Definitely.
And we could have definitely spent more time analyzing that aspect of the issue for sure.
Yeah, that's definitely something to keep in mind for future deep dives.
Absolutely.
And finally, we have this anonymous listener who shared a really personal experience.
Okay.
They identified with H after listening to our last deep dive.
That's great.
But mentioned that they still have to use WeChat.
Oh, wow.
Which is that popular Chinese messaging app.
Right.
To communicate with mainland Chinese clients for work.
Interesting.
I mean, talk about real-world complexities.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
That really brings home the point that, cross-strait relations aren't just some abstract political concept. They impact people's daily lives in very real and sometimes contradictory ways.
Yeah.
This listener might feel a strong sense of Taiwanese identity, yet still need to engage with mainland China on a practical level for work.
Exactly. It's a great example of how these issues actually play out in the lives of everyday people.
It really is.
So after diving deep into all this feedback, what are your final takeaways?
I think it's clear that there's no easy solution to this complex issue. Yeah. Truly understanding the historical context, the different perspectives, the very real human experiences involved.
Right.
That's crucial for anyone who wants to engage in meaningful dialogue about this.
Absolutely.
It makes you wonder, what role can individuals play in bridging these divides,
That's a good question.
How can we foster communication and understanding across cultural and ideological differences?
And we want to hear from you guys, too.
Yes.
Head over to our social media, our website, share your thoughts.
Let's keep this conversation going.
Let's keep this conversation going.
Thanks for joining us on the Deep Dive.
Thanks, everyone. We'll see you next time.
See you later.